Good morning. A little bit later this morning than I would like to do a video, but I am going to continue on in the Leviticus study. Um, I'm going to move into the Leviticus 13 and 14. Um, I'm not going to address Leviticus 12 because it's discussing childbearing, and I'm sure there's more to the than what it says. I'm certain there is. I just haven't I haven't been able to discern that yet. So I will come back to that as God leads me. But there's certainly something there for sure. So I wanted to get in now to Leviticus in 13 and 14. Now, this is the most incredible understanding in terms of what this actually means in the spirit. So I'm only going to go through 13 today because there's just too much in this that that I have to share. So I don't want to make this an hour video. I want to make it relatively short so people can tune in and listen. So I'm going to do 13 today, and 13 today is going to discuss leprosy. And leprosy in the Old Testament was a big deal, and what it means in the spirit is actually sin. And what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to pull out the spiritual perspectives of what is actually being taught here. Um, there's a few real important key factors to understand in terms of Leviticus 13 and 14. I believe that this is talking about the lake of fire. And this is, we have to find the lake of fire in the Torah to be able to have it in the New Testament. There's nothing new under the sun. What was been done will be done again. And the pattern has to still stand firm. And the pattern is always the case of the Torah being a physical, and the Old Testament being physical, and the New Testament being spiritual or the fulfillment. So here in Leviticus 13 and 14, we have the leprosy of man. And we can tie this into the New Testament, which I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of scriptures leaving Leviticus 13, but I will move a little bit. But this should be able to get you to open your spiritual eyes and ears to be able to connect the dots yourself in regards to what this means and how it is, in fact, in my understanding, speaking of the lake of fire, and how you're not going to go to the lake of fire and burn forever and ever. That is a terrible translation in the New Testament, and it's just not in the Torah. The Torah is the restitution of all man, restitution of all things, bringing everybody back to the garden. That is angel and man. And so it's just going to take a lot longer for some and a lot less for others. But man will be redeemed in three phases. And the three phases are the feasts, okay? And that's what we have: barley, Christ, wheat, first fruits of the wheat, which is the royal kingdom of priests in the next age, and then the grape harvest, which is all brought under the feet of Jesus Christ, of the threshing. Those are the rest of the people, having to learn the hard way to know who Jesus Christ is. Okay, and then the end comes in the eighth day, where we will see, specifically in Leviticus 14, we will see a transformation of those in the lake of fire actually being brought back inside the gates, which is absolutely amazing when you connect the dots and you see an actual sacrifice that is tied to the Azazel goat, which is, again, talking about the two goats in Leviticus 23. Or sorry, not Leviticus 23. I can't remember exactly which one it is now, but we'll get to that anyway. That's not my video today. So let's start out here. First and foremost, we have to understand that outside the gates or without the camp, without the gates, is the same word in Strong's as outside. It's all about outside the gates, okay? Outside the kingdom, all right? This is what this is all about, okay? When Paul was talking in Corinthians to the Corinthians, when the man had his father's wife, he basically destroyed put Christ to an open shame, clearly, with the knowledge and understanding of God. But remember now, it was the Old Testament that these folks were still in. So Paul should have had him stoned, but he didn't. And it's very important that you go back and you read what he did to the man that had his father's wife. He was instituting the new covenant, which is not here yet. And that is that he is sent outside the gates with Satan for his flesh to be destroyed, or his sins to be destroyed, so that he may be saved in the end. Okay, tremendous, tremendous meaning to what that actually is. Okay, a lot of messianics and Hebrew roots want to skip over that, and they just pretend that that never happened. Well, you listen, if it was the Old Testament and they were living by the law according to the physical tassels and eating clean and unclean and etc., then that man should have been stoned, but he was not, and it was the mystery of the lake of fire. Okay, so let's continue. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising scab or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto his sons the priest. Okay, I'm going to go back and forth between eSword and this, and as well as my JP Interlinear, as I pull out different translations. Now, it's very important here right away that it's going to who? Aaron first, or his sons. Okay, this is a pattern. Okay, like we've been talking about, Aaron as a representation of Jesus Christ as the high priest, and their sons, the priest, are the Melchizedekian priesthood. That is going to be part of the body of Christ, ruling with him and teaching the proper Torah from the heart in the millennium. Now, Aaron and his sons were the Levitical priests in the physical covenant. And it's no different than the pattern that Moses got from his father-in-law, where Moses was brought in the very tough decisions that had to be made, and the elders of the heads of the family had the other decisions to be made. Okay, this is a pattern that has been used. Okay, so this is what we're going to see. So the real tougher situations with the leprosy, in terms of the spirit and heart, which I'm going to show you, would obviously have to go see Aaron, or outside the gates to see Christ during the millennium. Okay, and I'm going to show you some stuff here today. And the priest shall look onto the plague in the skin of the flesh, and when the hair of the plague is turned white, and the plague in the sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is the plague of leprosy, and the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. Okay, so what do we have here? We're having the priest look upon the skin of the flesh, okay, and the plague is to be deeper than the skin of his flesh. It is the plague of leprosy, okay? This is talking about sins that is deeper in internal sin, okay? Sins that are on the outside, okay, we're going to see in 4, okay? Sorry, yes. Did I skip over that? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. When a man shall have a skin, I'm all tongue twisted here. Let's go to 2 again. I made a mistake here, also on top of this. When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising scab or a bright spot, and it shall be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought. Okay, so this is on the outside of the skin. Okay, this is the outside. So this would be an outside, being a sin that is on the outward. Okay, so it's not an internal, but an outward. It can be seen by people. Okay, it can be seen, meaning, those that have, alcoholism, drug addiction, etc., like that. Tie it to that. Okay, it can be seen, sins that can be seen. Okay, and then you get into 3, and the priest shall look on to the plague of in the skin of the flesh, And when the hair of the plague is turned white and the plague in the sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, is a plague of leprosy, and the priest shall look upon him and pronounce him to be unclean. Okay, so this would be the deeper sins. This would be the internal sins of the heart that we're talking about here in the spirit. These would be the sins that are done in the dark. Okay, perversion, pornography, behind closed doors. Okay, etc., etc. Only the ones that man can see. Only the ones that are internally where man is doing it, thinking that he's not being seen by anybody, but yet this is being addressed here. Okay. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in the sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof not turned white, then the priest shall shut him up for plague for 7 days. Okay, so this is sins that can be dealt with. Okay, they're dealing with these sins. These are the ones that are not discussed as a very, very troubling sin. This is not internal. Okay, so he's going to be dealt with. He's going to be basically shut up here is actually put out outside the gates, etc., which we'll see in 14. Okay, we see the sins can behavior, okay, etc., in 4 and 5. And the priest shall look upon him in the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in the sight be stay, and the plague is not spread in the skin, then he shall shut him up for another 7 days. Okay, so we have a total of 14 days here of him being put away outside the camp type thing, away from the people, being dealt with his sins. Okay, remember, spiritual. We're talking spiritual here. This is what's going to happen and during the millennium. This is all a millennium. This whole 13th chapter here is talking about what the priests had to do in the 7th day in the terms of the millennium. This is all 7th day stuff. Okay, this is going to be what the Melchizedekian priests are going to be dealing with. Sins that are dragging out, sins of man internally, externally, ones that can be seen by man and ones that can't be seen by man. Okay, these are the priests. Why is it the priests dealing with this stuff in the Old Testament? Why are they being brought to the priests for this kind of stuff, right? Not doctors and all these etc. things like we understand. Okay, they're being dealt with because it's talking about sin. Okay, and the priest shall look upon him on the 7th day, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin. The priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. Okay, so this is an outward sin. This is something that somebody is able to overcome over time with the help of the priest. And he shall what? He shall wash his clothes. What does wash his clothes mean? Okay, what does that spiritually mean? Okay, he's being basically cleansed, baptized, cleansed, and then he'll be brought back in. Okay, he's going to be brought back into the camp. He's going to be brought back into the people, into his family. Okay, this is what this spiritually means. Okay, as we continue here. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after that he had been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall see the priest again. Okay, so if it's going to continue to spread here, what does this mean? He's not overcoming. He's continuing to live in sin. He's continuing to not have his heart cleansed. He's having a hard time working things out. Okay, and if the priest see that behold, this scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. Okay, again, okay, it's spreading. It's not. He's not shaking his old ways. Okay, it's continuing to grow in him. Okay, these are all spiritual understandings of sin and the man trying to overcome. Okay. Now let's look at where we at here. We are at 8. Okay. 9. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, that he shall be brought unto the priest. Okay. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it had turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean and shut him up, and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. Now this is important. We're going to bring up Strong's here so you can see what's being said in terms of these words. Okay, so it's 9 through 11 here. And when the plague of leprosy is in the man, then he shall be brought unto the priest. Okay, so this is guy's a sinner. Okay, and the priest shall see him, and behold, the rising here, okay, is actually meaning, okay, prideful. Okay, prideful. He's still prideful. He's still dealing with stuff. He's still prideful. He's not learning. Okay, he's continuing to be prideful. Hide. He's not denying himself. He's not taking up the cross. He's denying. He's continuing living in self-image. Okay. And in the skin it shall have turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising. Okay, so what does quick mean? Okay, quick means essentially it's talking about it's continuing. It's opening up. It's getting worse. Okay, it's not getting better. All right, he's not getting better here. He's continuing to sin. He's continuing not to adhere to the the heart. Okay, he's not being converted here. He's continuing, and it's getting worse, and they have to deal with it. All right, it is an old leprosy, or it's death is what it is. Okay, it's death. Okay, in the skin of the flesh, the priest shall pronounce him unclean and shall not shut him. Okay, so he's now going to have to. He's in this situation. The priests have done 14, 15 days, and he's not learning, and it's continuing to grow. His sin is not being overcome. So now he's not going to be shut up. He's going to have to deal with Christ, where Christ is outside the gate, which I'll show you. Okay, remember, the tougher ones went to Moses, and the head of the elders were able to deal with most. Okay, Aaron, the same thing. Tougher things went to Aaron, and then the sons were able to deal with most. Okay, it's no different pattern here with us as the Melchizedekian priests of the royal kingdom and priests of the next age. We will be dealing with some, but there'll be some that are difficult, and we'll have to go to Christ. Okay. Now we're going to see the difference, though, that it is going to be good, and it works. Okay, and if the leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin, the plague from his head even unto his foot, the priest looks, the priest shall consider it, and behold, the leprosy hath covered all the flesh, shall pronounce him clean. The plague it has turned white, and he is all clean. Okay, so this is when you actually look at the breakdown of these words. Okay, it's talking about breaking forth. Okay, breaking, blooming, flourishing. Okay, now he's starting to shed. He's starting to get rid of all his sins. He's starting to overcome them. You got to kind of picture it as an addict. When he starts to overcome his addiction, what does his body go through? He goes through some terrible things, doesn't he? He goes through some terrible nightmares, tremors, you name it. I mean, it's scary. Some of them even almost die because they're coming out from an addiction, a real powerful addiction. Okay, this is what this means. Okay, it's broke out. It's flourished throughout his whole body. He's getting it out. He's overcoming it. Okay, and then he overcomes it, and then he is able to be clean and move on. Okay, this is what this is talking about. Okay, in 14, again, we dealt with the raw flesh. Okay, it is again a new sin or more sin or continuing in sin, and he is not learning, and therefore what he is declared unclean. Okay, now the rest of this here in regards to 15 all the way down, because I want to move on to 42. You can read this on your own, but this is essentially talking about the same idea. Okay, different sins, different ways, continuing to try to help him overcome and understand. And and we're seeing different types of sins and different types of ways to be dealt with. Some locked up for 7 days and continuing the process of to overcome, and some are not. Okay, so this is what this is talking about. Okay, so these are all things that are going to be happening during the millennium. Okay, these are the ones that are going to be. There's going to be, again, we're not going to get into the whole who's resurrected and etc. in the first resurrection and who's going to be part of the millennium, but the priests are going to be in charge of helping these people overcome sin, because this is what it's all about: overcoming self. Okay, the physical here in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, and in the New Covenant or the millennium, it's going to be talking about overcoming yourself, okay, actually overcoming the sins of man, okay, and being, outside the camp. Now, let's move on down to 42. Okay. And if there be in the bald head or a bald forehead, a white reddish sore, it is of leprosy, has sprung up into the bald head or into his forehead, the priest shall look upon him, and behold, the rising of the sore, white reddish, in the bald head or in his forehead, as of leprosy, appeareth in the skin of the flesh. He is a leprous man. Okay, it's in his head. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean, or utterly is also to be foul, okay, disgraceful, and shameful, okay. His plague is in his head, okay, in his head. Okay, think about that, okay, in the head. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? Okay, now it's overtaken this man or this woman, okay, completely overtaken them, and they are now in a position where they are going to have to be sent outside the camp. Okay, and we're going to see this here. Okay, this is a real headstrong sinner. All right, the leper in whom the plague, his clothes shall be ripped off or rent. Okay, and his head bare, and he shall put a veil, is what this means, over his mouth, and shall cry, unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled, he is unclean, and he shall dwell alone outside the camp where his habitation will be. Okay, or where he will be sitting, where he'll abode, he'll be by himself. Okay, soldiering alone outside the camp. Okay, this is what we have here in regards to the lake of fire outside the camp. Okay, and we're going to get into this next part here where it gets really important to understand. Okay. So this guy here, he'll be outside, he'll be crying, there'll be gnashing of teeth. Okay. This is the outside the camp. This is the lake of fire talk here. Okay. And what we have here is this person will be alone outside the camp. He'll be out there. He'll be in complete sin. He'll be in complete shame. He'll be gnashing his teeth in the darkness, and he'll be crying out, unfortunately, because he is in tremendous, shame, torment, however you want to call it. Okay. But listen to this. This is where it gets really important to understand. The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, wool garment or linen garment, whether it be the warp or the woof or the linen of linen, woolen, whether in the skin or in the things made of the skin. If the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment, or in the skin, either in the warp or of the woof or in anything of the skin, it is a plague of leprosy and shall be shown unto the priest. Okay, remember your garment. This is your garment. This is your righteous acts. Okay, remember now, spirit. All right, and the priest shall look upon the plague and shut it up the plague 7 days. Okay, so here we're seeing the works of man. Okay, and he shall look upon the plague on the 7th day. And if the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the skin of any of the work that is made of the skin of the plague, and is spreading leprosy, he is unclean. Okay, getting worse. Okay, he shall therefore burn that garment. Okay, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or anything of the skin wherein the plague is, for it is spreading leprosy, it shall be burnt in the fire. Lake of fire. Okay, righteous acts of the saints. Okay, what is the righteous acts of the saints? That's your garment. That's your white linen garment. Okay, it's your works. Okay, what does Christ tell us in the New Testament? Those that have works, he said that some are going to be burnt. Some are gold, some are silver, some are of other material, wood, etc. And after they are burnt, after they go through the fire, some will suffer loss, some won't, but you shall be saved. Okay, these are your works, these are your ways. Okay, these are the sins, these are the righteousness or the unrighteousness of you. The garment, your walk. This is what this is talking about here. This is the lake of fire, what I'm talking about. And what I mean by that, well, I'll show some images in a minute. Okay, and if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or any other skin, the priest shall command that he shall wash the plague and shut him up another 7 days. So what are we getting here? We're getting water and fire. Remember, tie all this to sin. This is all sin. This is all talking about. Remember, this is one garment. Watch this. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed. What does washed mean? Again, cleansed. Okay, and behold, the plague have not changed his color, the plague be not spread. It is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward to bear within outside. Okay, what is happening here? Okay, this is a terrible sinner. This is the lake of fire. Okay, so we had a fire. We burnt it first. Okay, you burnt the garment, and then you washed the garment, and now you're burning it again. This is the same garment. This is talking about the flesh. This is talking about the man. This is talking about sins. This is talking about the works of man. All man's works will be judged. Okay, do you see can you see what it says here? Do you understand what this is? And it's going to get better as I go into 14, which I won't do that today, but you'll see. You can look at it ahead yourself with this in mind, okay? But it is, again, washing, burning. Washing, burning. That's the process. And the priest will look, and behold, the plague is somewhat dark after the washing of it. Then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the woof. And if it appears still in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything in the skin spreading, thou shalt burn it with fire. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see the process here? Lake of fire. Okay? Lake of fire. Here's the tabernacle. Fire, water. Enter the holy place, enter the Holy of Holies. Outside the camp. Kicked outside the camp, in the lake of fire, has to go through the fire and water to be cleansed, to be brought back in the holy place. The cleansing, water and fire, laver and altar, the altar that burneth forever, okay, or even into the 8th day, all right? Cleanse, fire, okay? Cleanse, fire, wash, okay? Here's the camp. There's a good picture of the camp, okay? Here's the tabernacle. Okay, this is where the Melchizedekian priesthood will be with Christ. Here's the camp with all the nations. Those are the common Israelites. Outside the camp is the lake of fire. Outside the camps is the lake of fire. This is where they will go for leprosy. This is the lake of fire, and they're going to have to come back through washing and burning their garments in the lake of fire. This is what this is actually talking about. Okay, this is what this means. Okay, because you're not going to burn and wash and burn and wash the plague, the garment. Okay, you're not going to walk around with a linen garment that has holes in it, and holes here, holes there, burnt marks here, burnt marks there. Okay, that's not what this is talking about. We're talking about the flesh. Okay, overcoming sin. And the garment, either warp or woof, or whatsoever thing in the skin, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time, and it shall be clean. Okay, again, it's wash, burn, lake of fire. Righteous acts of the saints, unrighteous acts of man, the flesh, the sin. This is the law of the plague of leprosy in the garment of the wool and the linen and the warp and the woof, or anything of the skins, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. Okay? So this is what this means. This is what this is talking about. Leprosy is sin. Okay? Some sin is worse than others. Some leprosy at the time was worse than others. Okay? Some had it really bad. Some had it not so bad. Okay? What happened to Moses' sister when she was what? She sinned against Moses. What happened? What did God give her? He gave her leprosy because of her sin. You see the connection. You see the pattern. Okay, he healed. Who did Christ heal in the New Testament? One of the first things that he did. He healed a leper. He cleansed it. Okay. He uses the word cleanse. It's very important to pick up the words. It's cleansed. Okay. Cleansing you of your sins. All right. 14 is dealing with the 8th day, which we're going to get into. Okay. But now I want to go over here real quick to Numbers 5 and show you what this means. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, command the children of Israel that they put out of the camp every leper and everyone that had an issue in whatsoever is defiled by the dead. This is huge. Okay. In Leviticus 15, which we'll get to, it's talking about running issues. Okay. Running issue of the body. Okay. Again, it's talking about sin. Okay. Leprosy is full sin, lake of fire sin, and running issue of man was not an issue of essentially that. I mean, I guess it would be serious, but it's not as serious as leprosy. Okay, this is what this stuff means. Both male and female shall you put outside the camp, shall you put them, that they defile not their camps in the midst of where I dwell. Okay, clearly, this is what this is talking about. Christ is not going to be around God. The Father's not going to be around sinners. They're not going to be around them. Those that are sin and those that are have leprosy in this Old Testament, but in the millennium and in the 8th day, they're going to be outside the camp. They're not going to be defiling the people, defiling the righteous, the saints. They're not. God's not going to be around sin. Christ is not going to be around sin. Okay, inside the camp, inside the gates, inside the city. Okay. And the children of Israel did so, and they put them outside the camp as the Lord spake unto Moses, so they did to the children of Israel. Okay? So this is what this means. All right? And we'll get into 14 more, but and also Numbers 19, which I will talk about in, I guess we'll tie that to Leviticus 14, is talking about the red heifer. Okay, and the scarlet, which is the toleth worm. Which is where we'll get into kind of more understanding of the toleth worm and how absolutely fascinating that is, in terms of how it is the body of the young of the toleth worm feeds off the mother. She secretes a red dye down the tree or the pole or the stake, like Christ. We're feeding off him. Okay, this is all tied together. All right. And the worm that dieth not. Remember, and he also talks, I think, in Psalm 23. I can't remember. No, not Psalm 23. I forget what Psalm it is where he talks that he is a worm. So this is all patterns. Okay. So what else do I want to talk about here? Oh, I wanted to talk about, let's go to Hebrews and show you what I'm talking about outside the camp. And we're going to go to 13, I think it is. Yeah, 13:10. Let's start there. We have an altar whereof they have no right to eat, which serve the tabernacle. For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin and burned outside the camp. He's going back to Leviticus here. He's going in the future also in terms of discussing the lake of fire, the flesh being burned outside. Okay, washing, burning, lake of fire. Okay, wherefore Jesus also, that he may sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gates. Okay, let us go forth therefore unto him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no, okay, this is all talking about Leviticus 13 and 14. This is all pointing us to what the lake of fire actually means. Christ took our sins upon him, and he died the leper's death. He died outside the city of Jerusalem. He died outside the camp. Okay, he did do the leper's death. Okay, he did it for us. This is what this is talking about. Go forth out to him. Who's going to have to go out forth to them, to Christ during this time? It's those that have leprosy and that are outside the camp of the lake of fire. They're going to have to see Christ outside the camp to deal with their heart, to get their heart right, after those of the Melchizedekian priest are helping those inside the camp, helping the common Israelites overcome their sins. And those that are outside the camp, they're going to need a lot more work. Therefore, let us go forth, therefore, unto him outside the camp. Okay. Okay. He suffered the death, the leper's death outside the camp. All right. And this is what this all means. Okay. So I'm hoping that you're able to understand some of this or get what I'm saying here on this. There's a lot of scriptures I could get into in regards to the lake of fire. The lake of fire, again, like I said, is only talked about in the New Testament, I think 4 or 5 times. And it's translated in terms of, being in the lake of fire forever and ever, which is not the correct translation, a horrific translation. It actually means ages of the ages, which is only 8 ages in my understanding, okay? And we're about to enter in the 7th age, or the great age, or the ages of all ages is going to be the 7th and 8th day. Okay, and this is what's going to happen. And I talked about this before in regards to the altar going to be continually burning and getting the sacrifices into the 8th day, which we've seen in Ezekiel. So this is what the lake of fire is. It is absolutely tied to Leviticus 13 and 14, Numbers 5 and Numbers 19. And it's also talked about with the 2 goats. The Azazel goat is the one that is sent outside the camp, out into a field. Same with one of the birds, okay, which we'll get into Leviticus 14 and tie that together and talking about how Christ is the atonement, which just takes away the sin of, dies for the sin. He is your atonement, and he's also the one that takes away the sin of the world, which John the Baptist had said. Okay, which is both goats, in my understanding. But again, we all can glean. You can glean from this. Take this. You may think I'm completely nuts. That's fine. But look into it yourself. Find out what this actually means. Find the lake of fire. You have to find it in Torah for it to be true, and understand that the redemption of all things is what the plan of salvation actually is. Some are going to have to be washed and burned, washed and burned, washed and burned through a process of time in the lake of fire. Okay, lake and fire. That is all for now. Thank you.